James and Colby were seniors in high school and were best friends. It was a Friday night after school. So James was going to spend the night at Colby's house. The boys were on their way to buy some snacks at a local convenience store. Anticipating a fun and exciting evening filled with movies, video games and junk food. Colby parked his Jeep in front of the Quick Pick store, and he and James got out and went inside. It didn't take the teenagers long to find their favorite snacks and beverages. Once they paid for their items, they headed back to the Jeep, ready to get their weekend started. However, much to their dismay and surprise, they found a strange scene by their vehicle. Two younger boys, probably around 10 and 12 years old, dressed in dark clothing, were standing next to the Jeep, blocking James and Colby's path. The two kids were not looking at the high schoolers, however. Instead, they were both looking down at the ground. In fact, it looked like they had their eyes closed. "Can we help you?" James asked. "We need a ride," the older boy said in a matter-of-fact tone of voice, never looking up at James. Colby and James froze, and didn't know what to say or do. They both felt like something wasn't right and were getting a bad feeling about this whole situation. "We can't give you guys a ride, sorry," Colby said, apologetically. Both he and James walked around the kids and started to climb into the Jeep. They wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. "Yeah, sorry," James added, nervously. "We really have to get home right away." At that moment, the two young boys looked up and opened their solid black eyes. James and Colby gasped in horror at the sight. The oldest boy seemed to get mad, and snarled in a commanding tone, "Give us a ride." Colby, now completely terrified, had seen enough. He gunned the engine and floored the Jeep away from the strange duo, like a bat out of hell. As the sun set, they raced to the safety of Colby's house. James turned to his friend and asked, "Who were they? And what was wrong with their eyes? Did you see their eyes?" "I don't want to talk about it," Colby said, on the verge of tears. "Let's just get back to my place and tell my mom." When the boys arrived at the house, they burst in the front door and started excitedly explaining what had happened to Colby's mother. She was confused, and tried to calm down her son and his friend. They had solid black eyes, Colby told his mom. "I think they were black-eyed children. Just like in the scary stories online." "It was probably your imagination, honey," his mom explained. "Or maybe a trick of the light, or an optical illusion. There's no such thing as black-eyed children." Just then, James started groaning and clutching his head. He was feeling very dizzy and sick at his stomach. Colby and his mom made James sit down on the couch, and got him a glass of water. About 40 minutes later, after resting for a while, James was feeling a lot better. He and Colby were now in Colby's bedroom, talking about what had happened earlier. "I think those kids made me sick," James said. "I've heard that if you come in contact with those black-eyed things, you can suddenly become violently ill." "Yeah, I've heard that, too," Colby said. "What else could have caused it?" "I just wished your mom had believed us," James added. "I mean, those kids were weird, and gave me a bad feeling as soon as I saw them." At that moment, Colby jumped up and pointed at the window with a gasp. "Look!" Colby screamed. "They're out there." James turned to see the two pale kids from earlier, just standing in the back alley behind the house, staring in the window at them. James sprang to his feet, to join his buddy in terror. The older boy outside looked almost sad. Then he said, "Please, let us in. We're so cold." Colby shook his head and told them to go away. At that, the boys both looked angry and the older one hissed like a cat, demanding to be let in the house. Knowing that Colby's mom had left to go visit her sister, the boys had no choice but to call the police for help. It wasn't long before 2 patrol officers showed up at the door and the teenagers told them everything. The policemen seemed a bit amused, but took a look around the property. However, they found no trace of the young black-eyed children that had been stalking Colby and James. The cops returned to the front porch, and promised they would patrol the area off and on, all night long, and keep an eye out for anybody prowling around Colby's property. With that, the officers left, leaving the teens to fend for themselves. Later that night, after watching a movie and stuffing themselves with chips and soda, the boys passed out from their long and trying day. James slept on the hide-a-bed sofa, while Colby slept in his own twin bed. It wasn't long before Colby was startled awake, his eyes shooting open. He sensed that he was being watched. Colby raised his head off the pillow, looking toward the window across the room. There, once again, glaring into the bedroom at him, Colby saw those creepy kids with the coal eyes. Startled, Colby shot into a sitting position, sending his bag of corn chips sailing through the air. Those evil children just watched him intently, their dark eyes never breaking contact with Colby's gaze. They didn't blink or move. They just stared. Colby let out a yelp, and bolted from his bed towards James. James was already awake now, and looking toward the window. He too had sensed the black-eyed entities while sleeping. The things at the window made angry faces, just like before, and growled at the boys as if they were wild animals instead of human beings. Colby joined his best friend on top of the hide-a-bed, ready to fight if they had to. Suddenly, a noise from the front yard made the 2 kids at the window turn and run away, toward the front of the house. "Hey, let's go see if my mum's home yet," Colby told James. "We need to call the police again." The friends raced into the living room, and at that very moment, Colby's mother was entering through the front door, just now arriving back from her sister's place. "Mom, close that door. Quick!" Colby shouted, racing toward his unsuspecting mother. "Those things are out there again, and we can't let them get in the house." However, Colby's mother seemed to just stare blankly at her son and his friend. Her eyes wide and glazed over, as if she were in some kind of trance. She said, "Hello, honey. A couple of your little friends are out here. They are very cold and need a place to stay. So, I invited them to stay here with us." With that, the 2 black-eyed children appeared in the open doorway, staring at the boys. Colby and James went rigid with fear and disbelief. They knew that you should never invite a black-eyed child into your home. But now, it was too late.